Hey there besties! Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're continuing our recap of the manhwa, Like Husband, Like Son. If you're new to this series, check the description below for links to previous episodes. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Thank you for walking with me, Mr. Jen. I'm feeling much better now, Sophia said softly, her mood lifting as she glanced at Marco while they resumed their walk. Then let's go home. Our son is waiting to meet you, his mother, Marco replied with a gentle smile. Sophia flushed with excitement and a touch of nervousness. Now that you mention it, I'm feeling nervous again. How am I going to face Roro as his mother? Her smile faltered slightly as doubt crept in. Marco gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. I've booked a grand room at the hotel, he said, his tone casual yet meaningful. Sophia blinked, unsure of what he meant. There's something we haven't done in a long time, he said, leaning closer. And it'll help Mrs. Jen completely forget about the kids for a while. Sophia flushed deeper, caught between amusement and embarrassment. Go away, she teased, though her tone lacked conviction. Marco chuckled but didn't press further. Soon, they arrived at the Jen family residence. Marco's parents and Yuki were waiting at the entrance to greet them. Mother, father, Yuki, Sophia greeted warmly as she and Marco stepped out of the car. Sweetie, you're here. Come in, quickly, Grandma Jen said, waving them inside with an affectionate smile. Yuki guided Sophia into the sitting room, her cheerful demeanor contagious. Here, have a seat, she offered, helping Sophia settle into a comfortable chair. A moment later, little Romeo appeared, led into the room by his grandmother. He was dressed in a suit, looking both curious and slightly puzzled. Why am I dressed so formally? Are we going to a banquet? He asked, fidgeting with his collar. Grandma Jen smiled and patted his shoulder. Because Roro is going to meet someone very special, she said, guiding him toward the sitting room. Sophia's heart raced as Romeo entered. The room grew still, filled with anticipation. Oh, it's Sweetie. Why are you being so secretive? Little Romeo said cheerfully as he walked toward Sophia. Sophia knelt as he approached, her heart racing. Roro, she said warmly, her voice trembling with emotion. Is this really my son? She wondered, her hand shaking as she gently touched his face. Sweetie, what's wrong? Little Romeo asked, noticing her flushed face and the tears welling in her eyes. He's really my... Sophia began but stopped, turning to Marco for confirmation. He nodded gently. Roro, she said, facing her son with a bright, yet tearful smile. Do you know? I'm your mummy. I'm your real mummy. Romeo blinked, looking perplexed. You're Sweetie. Why do you want to be my mummy? Mummy is a real baddie. Sophia shook her head, her voice soft but firm. Roro, listen to me. I know it's hard to explain, but I am your real mummy, your biological mummy. You're my son. She hugged him tightly, her joy overflowing. Oh my, happiness has come so suddenly. How could I have such a cute son? Romeo tilted his head, pondering her words. You mean, I sneaked out from your tummy secretly? Yes. Roro is so smart. Sophia replied, laughing as she broke the hug. Romeo's expression turned thoughtful before he declared, in that case, can I still marry you when I grow up? Sophia smiled gently. No, Roro. I'm your mummy. You can't marry me. Romeo frowned, his tone turning defiant. I don't care. I'll grow up quickly and marry Sweetie. Marco, standing nearby, pulled Sophia closer with a protective air. She's already my wife, Roro. You won't have the chance in this life. Nonsense. I'll marry her when I grow up. Romeo retorted angrily. Marco smirked, crossing his arms. Fine, if you don't want to be her son, you can find another woman to be your mummy. That way, Sweetie won't have to tire herself making roasted duck, cured meat, preserved eggs, and all those delicious meals for you. Romeo's mouth watered at the mention of food, his resolve faltering as Marco continued listing delicacies. Blushing in embarrassment, Romeo finally hugged Sophia tightly. I don't want to be anyone else's son. I'll be Sweetie's son, and she'll make me all the good food. Then why aren't you calling her mummy? Marco asked sharply. Romeo hesitated, looking tense. But I like calling her Sweetie more. Marco's eyes narrowed. No, you can't. Daddy, you're scaring me. Romeo cried, hiding in Sophia's arms. Sophia knelt to his level, stroking his back soothingly. Roro can call me whatever he wants. Don't scare him anymore, she scolded Marco. See? Sweetie is the best. Romeo exclaimed, sticking his tongue out at Marco in mockery. Marco's jaw tightened as he clenched his fist in frustration. The cake's here. Yuki announced brightly, wheeling a large cake into the room. Congratulations. Today marks the first day you two acknowledged each other. Wow. What a big cake. Romeo cheered, running toward her. Before anyone could respond, a cold voice echoed through the room. This cake is smeared with blood. Can you eat it? Everyone froze, turning toward the source of the voice. Matthew, they exclaimed in unison, seeing him standing in the doorway, his gaze sharp and unwavering. Matthew, your legs, you can stand now. Grandma Jen exclaimed, her face lighting up as she noticed him standing without his wheelchair. Did I disappoint you? Matthew replied coldly, his voice cutting through her joy and causing her to flinch. What are you saying? She asked, her tone tinged with shock and confusion. Sonia wanted to die. She was forced into it, driven to suicide because she had no other way out. And everyone here today is her murderer. His words were sharp, his anger unmistakable. The room fell silent, the weight of his accusation pressing on everyone. Is this how you talk to your family? Grandma Jen asked, her voice trembling. We're heartbroken over her death too, but ultimately, she brought it upon herself. Matthew's expression darkened. No, you all forced her to her death step by step. Maybe you didn't kill her with your own hands, but your actions left her with no escape. Now that Sonia's gone, what's the point of me staying here? His voice rose with each word, his pain spilling over into anger. In that case, why are you here now? Grandma Jen replied, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm here to tell you this. Don't think you can sit back and rest easy just because Sonia is gone. This is just the beginning. Matthew shouted, his finger pointing directly at Marco. Marco remained calm, his tone steady as he responded. Then I hope you'll deal with this openly, not by ambushing us from the shadows. Openly? Matthew scoffed bitterly. Did any of you act openly when you pushed Sonia to her death? Marco's expression shifted into a smirk, his words cutting back. So when Sonia was causing harm to us, were we supposed to just avoid her and let her do as she pleased? Or would you have preferred we died instead of her? Marco Jen, don't be flippant with me. Matthew snapped, his anger flaring. I'm not here to joke. Marco let out a sharp hiss of disdain, his indifference fueling Matthew's rage. Matthew, are you really going to turn against your family for that woman? The blood of the Jen family flows through you. Grandma Jen pleaded, her grip on his arm tightening as tears streamed down her face. If you care so much about my blood, then take it. Matthew shot back coldly, his gaze hard and unyielding. Unfilial son. Grandpa Jen bellowed, slamming his cane against the floor. Woo! The punishment ruler. At his command, the butler stepped forward swiftly, presenting the wooden ruler with a solemn expression. Grandpa Jen raised the ruler and struck Matthew's back with a resounding crack. This is for betraying your family and siding with that heartless woman, he shouted, his face red with anger. Sonia was not a heartless woman. Matthew shot back, his voice unwavering despite the pain. Grandpa Jen struck him again, the force behind the blow even heavier. This is for your inability to distinguish right from wrong and for hurting others without reason. Anyone who hurts Sonia is my enemy. Matthew roared, his defiance undiminished. The ruler came down again, harder this time. And this is for breaking your aunt's heart after everything she has done to raise you. Grandpa Jen's voice cracked with emotion as his strikes grew more forceful. Matthew remained stoic, gritting his teeth through the pain, a twisted grin forming on his face. The room fell silent, everyone too stunned to intervene. Unable to bear the sight any longer, Yuki leapt between them, shielding Matthew from another blow. The ruler struck her arm, and she winced, stumbling slightly. Yuki! Grandma Jen cried out in alarm, rushing forward. Marco and Sophia froze in horror, their breaths caught in their throats. Stop it, uncle. You'll kill Matthew if you keep going. Yuki shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched her arm. Go away. I don't need you meddling in my affairs. Matthew snapped, his voice rough with anger, though he made no move to push her aside. And I don't need your approval to stand up for what's right. Yuki shot back, turning to face Grandpa Jian, her stance firm. Yuki, move out of the way. Grandpa Jian barked, his tone as commanding as ever. Sorry, uncle, but I won't budge until you stop this madness, Yuki replied firmly, her unwavering gaze meeting his. Grandpa Jian's hand trembled as he held the ruler, frustration etched into his features. After a tense moment, he let out a heavy sigh. Fine. Let him go. Thank you, uncle, Yuki said, bowing slightly before turning to follow Matthew out of the room. Yuki. Grandma Jian called after her, her voice laden with worry, but Yuki didn't stop. As the door closed behind them, Marco exhaled sharply. Well, the inevitable has finally happened. Sophia turned to him, her expression clouded with concern. What do we do now? Will you be okay? Marco gave her a lopsided grin, placing a hand on her head gently. Mrs. Jian, your job tonight is to make sure I'm well fed. I'll need the strength for what's ahead. Sophia flushed, swatting his hand away. You're still joking at a time like this. He chuckled softly, the tension in the air slightly dissipating as they exchanged glances. That night, in their bedroom, Sophia hesitated, standing near the bed in a schoolgirl outfit. Her cheeks flushed as she adjusted the hem of the skirt. Why do you want me to wear something from 6 years ago? She asked softly. Marco leaned back against the headboard, giving her a playful grin. To make up for the past, he said with a casual thumbs up. Back then, everything happened too fast, and we didn't get to create beautiful memories. Now's our chance to make up for it. Double the effort. Sophia's face reddened further. Twice, her, she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Well, I'd better go check on Romeo. She turned to leave, but Marco caught her wrist, pulling her gently toward him. Romeo will have you all to himself tomorrow, he said with a smirk, effortlessly lifting her and laying her on the bed. Marco. You're too much, she protested, though her voice was soft. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Am I? He teased, his lips brushing her neck. She flinched slightly as his teeth grazed her skin. That hurt, she whispered, glancing back at him. How else can I leave my mark? He replied, his tone teasing as his fingers traced over her neck. Sophia sighed, her protests fading as her cheeks flushed deeper. I won't be able to go to work tomorrow, she mumbled. Exactly, Marco said, his voice low and coaxing. You deserve a break. Stay home with Romeo for a few days. It's safer that way. Before she could respond, he pulled her closer, his movements deliberate but tender. The intimacy grew between them, the room filled with warmth and quiet whispers. After their intimate moment, Sophia rested her head on Marco's chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns. Don't worry about Yuki, Marco said, breaking the silence. She might just be Matthew's breakthrough. Sophia tilted her head to look up at him, her eyes filled with curiosity. Yuki? A breakthrough? Marco smiled and kissed her forehead gently. Go to sleep. Don't overthink it. The next day, at Jenyi Group, Marco sat in his office reviewing documents when his secretary entered hastily. President, Matthew has gathered all the directors. They're in the boardroom, and he's carrying a significant proposal, the secretary reported, his tone tense. Marco leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. He moves fast. I didn't think he'd act so soon, he muttered. Rising from his seat, he straightened his suit. Let's go. In the boardroom, Matthew sat confidently at the rear, surrounded by the directors. Marco halted just before reaching the table, his eyes narrowing at the scene. Well, brother, Marco began, his voice calm but cutting, it's rare to see you in such good spirits and back in the office. But it seems you've chosen the wrong seat. Matthew's expression darkened. This seat was mine to begin with, he snapped. Marco smirked. Ah, yes, was, 6 years ago. You seem to have forgotten announcing your decision to step down and promising not to interfere in directors' meetings. Matthew's tone was cold and unwavering. I remember. But circumstances have changed. I feel the need to intervene now. Marco's eyes gleamed with sharpness. Intervene? So the company's just a toy in the hands of a 3-year-old? Something you pick up and drop whenever it suits you? What happens when you lose interest again? Will your brother have to clean up your messes, as always? The directors exchanged uneasy glances. Though many supported Matthew's return, Marco's words cut deep, igniting doubts. That's right, One thought, his gaze flicking to Matthew. He left us in the lurch 6 years ago. If not for the chairman preparing Marco to take over, we could have suffered immense losses. Another director frowned, mulling over Marco's words. Matthew's return felt like a chance to break free from Marco's control. But what if he abandons us again? Marco noticed their hesitation, a small smile tugging at his lips. Finally, these spineless fools are starting to think clearly, he mused. Matthew, unperturbed, leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled as he addressed the room. If I swear upon my honor and put it in writing, will that prove my commitment? The past is for failures to dwell on. Successful people look ahead and plan for the future. His calm yet assertive demeanor silenced the room, drawing all eyes to him as the battle for leadership intensified. I swear upon my honor that I will be a good chairman, Matthew said calmly, his tone unwavering. Marco's expression remained neutral, though inwardly, he smirked. That's great. The more resolute he seems, the easier it will be to test his limits. Then, what if another Sonia Shear appears? Marco asked, his words sharp. Matthew's calm demeanor shattered. You are not allowed to mention her name, he shouted, his sudden outburst startling the directors. Marco leaned back slightly, his voice steady but commanding. For the past 6 years, I've worked tirelessly for this company, achieving success after success. And now you say you want to return simply because you feel like it. Is that how things work? Matthew clenched his fists. Then what do you want to do? He retorted, his anger barely contained. Marco scanned the room, noting the unease among the directors. The stage is set. Most of these directors are on my side. Matthew's rigidity has alienated him. It's no surprise they prefer my approach. This fight is already mine. Very simple, Marco said, his voice calm yet decisive. We'll let the entire company vote. Fair and square. His words sent a ripple of shock through the room. This isn't acceptable, one of Matthew's allied directors blurted, his voice trembling. The director's thoughts betrayed his panic. The Zhang family already headhunted many managers and supervisors loyal to Matthew. Those who remain are either supportive of Marco or indifferent to him. A company-wide vote would be disastrous for Matthew's chances. Director Wang, what's making you so nervous? Marco asked, his gaze locking onto the man. Director Wang stammered, unable to form a coherent response. I agree. Let's do as you say, Matthew interjected, surprising everyone, especially his own allies. Director Wang visibly flinched, his confidence shaken. Very well, Marco said, gesturing to his secretary. Secretary Lee, send out a notice. We'll hold an anonymous vote across the company in half an hour. Yes, sir. Lee responded, stepping out to execute the order. Half an hour. Director Wang thought, wiping his damp forehead. There's no time to organize or counter this. Marco's planned this perfectly. Marco, catching the nervous gesture, smirked. Director Wang, you might want to stop wiping your head. You only have a few strands of hair left. If you keep at it, there won't be any left, he quipped, his tone light but cutting. Startled, Director Wang instinctively adjusted his wig, eliciting muffled chuckles from a few directors. Meanwhile, news of the announcement spread through the company like wildfire. A chairman election? What's going on? Is something wrong with the chairman? He's been doing a great job. Wait, Matthew Jian? Isn't he the department head? He's actually challenging for the chairman's position. Well, his last name is Jian too. He does have the right to contest. But still. I'd hate to see Chairman Marco leave. He's so capable, and good-looking too. The chatter and speculation filled the air, a mix of confusion and tension brewing among the employees as they awaited the impending vote. In the boardroom, Matthew glanced at his phone, the screen illuminating a message. Even though we can't see the voting results yet, it's very likely that you'll lose. What should we do? His reply was swift. You know what to do. You've been hiding under Marco for so many years, it must have been tough. The recipient, Secretary Lee, Matthew's hidden ally, read the message with a grim expression. Without hesitation, he set his plans in motion to undermine Marco. Shortly after, rumors began circulating among the staff. Whispers about Marco's alleged negligence in financial losses and glowing praise for Matthew's leadership style spread like wildfire. Is that so? I've always thought the chairman is a little too fierce, one employee murmured. It might be better to switch to someone with a more human touch, another agreed. But Marco is so good-looking, a staff member said, blushing. Matthew's no worse. Look at his photos, someone chimed in, showing pictures on her phone. Really? Let me see. I'd pick Matthew too. They're both from the Jen family anyway. Does it really matter who's chairman? I've been here for years, and maybe a change in leadership will mean a change in the system. Who knows, I might finally get promoted, one staff member speculated, her words planting seeds of doubt. Unbeknownst to them, Fifi stood in the corner, her expression tense as she absorbed the heated conversation. At the Jen manor, Sophia was feeding little Romeo, who sat contentedly on her lap, when her phone buzzed. Fifi, she greeted cheerfully as she answered. Where are you? Why aren't you at work? Fifi's voice burst through the line, urgent and loud. I'm at home with Roro, Sophia replied, puzzled by the intensity. Get to the office now. Marco might be in trouble. Fifi shouted, her tension unmistakable. Sophia hurried into the office, carrying little Romeo. She burst into Fifi's room, her face tense with worry. Fifi, what's the situation now? She asked urgently. It's not looking good, Fifi replied, her tone grim. I walked through several departments, and most of the discussions seem to be leaning toward Matthew. The voting starts in 10 minutes. How could this happen? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Is Matthew really that popular in the company? I've been here for years, and I hardly ever heard anyone mention him. He's been the department head for years and kept a low profile. Only the old-timers, those who've been here for over 5 years, really know him. But his sudden surge in popularity feels off. It's almost as if someone's been working behind the scenes, Fifi said thoughtfully. But it's too late to find out who or stop them now. What can we do? Sophia asked, her anxiety clear. A heavy silence filled the room as both women looked at each other, searching for answers. That's easy. Just take action, a cheerful voice piped up. Romeo. Fifi exclaimed, startled as she noticed the boy. Sophia, why did you bring him here, especially now? Roro insisted on coming with me, so I brought him along, Sophia admitted, blushing as she glanced at the child. Sophia, do you understand how serious this situation is? Fifi scolded, her frustration spilling over. Wait. Sophia interrupted, raising a hand to calm her. She turned to Romeo, crouching to his level. Roro, what did you mean when you said it's simple? Romeo hesitated, scratching his head. Roro, this isn't a game, Sophia said gently, trying to temper her worry with a patient tone. I don't really understand what you are talking about, Romeo began, but I do know one thing. If the bastard father can't beat the dumb uncle in a popularity contest, then I just have to help him get more votes. He grinned widely, proud of his idea. Get more votes. Sophia echoed, her eyes widening in confusion. Fifi looked equally baffled. How? They echoed in unison, staring at Romeo. You adults are so clueless, he said with a confident grin. You don't even know how to get votes. Watch me. Without waiting for a response, he dashed out of Fifi's office. Outside, Romeo approached a group of 3 women chatting in the corridor. Hello, beautiful ladies, he said with a wide smile. Ah, it's Little Master, they exclaimed, their faces lighting up. I heard there's going to be a vote later. Can you vote for my father? He asked sweetly, tilting his head and giving them his best puppy dog eyes. Oh, so cute. Of course, we plan to vote for Marco anyway, they said, their cheeks flushing. Thank you, my lovely ladies. I knew you were the best, he replied, blowing kisses and bowing politely, making the group giggle. Romeo continued his charm offensive, chatting and joking with other staff members. He even danced with one of the women, drawing laughter from the growing crowd. Hello, everyone. I'm Romeo Jen, Marco Jen's son. Please support my father, he announced cheerfully, while several employees recorded him on their phones. Okay. We'll definitely support him, a chorus of voices replied, their adoration for the little boy evident. Meanwhile, back near Fifi's office, she and Sophia stood in stunned silence, watching the commotion in the lobby. What is going on here? Fifi finally asked, her expression a mix of disbelief and amusement. I think I've got an idea, Sophia said suddenly, grabbing Fifi's hand. Come on. Wait. Where are we going? Fifi asked as Sophia pulled her along. To the R&D department, Sophia replied confidently. The R&D department. Fifi echoed, looking puzzled. Don't you know? You're practically the goddess of the nerds in R&D, Sophia whispered conspiratorially. You're the beautiful vice chairperson. No one else can win their votes like you can. Me? Fifi exclaimed, blushing furiously. Why don't you do it? I'm the young miss of the U family and the vice chairperson of Gen Yi group. And you expect me to lower myself, act all cute, and sweet-talk a bunch of tech guys? Impossible, she huffed, folding her arms indignantly. Sophia let out a deep sigh, her voice filled with concern. Poor Marco, he's worked so hard for the company all these years, but now Matthew Jen is trying to take it all away from him through underhanded tactics. I feel so helpless, she said, wiping a tear from her eyes as she pretended to cry. Sophia, you really know how to play the part, Fifi remarked with a teasing smirk, shaking her head in pity. All right, fine, for Marco's sake, I'll do what it takes. Fifi quickly walked into the R&D department, drawing everyone's attention. Handsome gentleman of the R&D department, please vote for our president. Okay, she said, blowing kisses with a wink. The staff in the department froze, their faces turning red with embarrassment. Flustered, Fifi hurried out of the department, cheeks still burning. Sophia, stifling her laughter, watched her. I didn't expect you to go all out like that. You even sounded so sweet and coquettish. That's priceless. Sophia said, laughing quietly. Stop laughing, Sophia, or I'll. Fifi started, her face flushed with embarrassment. I swear I'll get you back if you laugh again. The two of them continued their campaign, moving on to the admin and sales departments, drumming up support for Marco. Later, the voting was complete, and the directors gathered in the boardroom. Everyone has voted. Let's count the ballots, a director announced. Master Matthew, we're almost there, Director Wang said nervously. Don't worry. Just watch, Matthew replied confidently, showing no signs of concern. The directors exchanged anxious glances, but their faces relaxed slightly. They knew Matthew's confidence rarely failed him. Announcing the results of this president election, a lady read aloud, out of 1,000 votes, Marco Jen received 556 votes, while Matthew Jen received 444 votes. Matthew and the directors were stunned. Years ago, at Rickman Noble School, a prestigious boarding school in England, Matthew Jen, 12 years old, walked along the garden, deep in thought. Brother Matthew, someone called, their voice filled with distress. Matthew turned to see Marco, just 9 years old, running toward him with tears in his eyes. What's wrong? Who bullied you? Matthew asked, concern flickering in his expression. It was William. Marco cried. He pushed me off the horse during equestrian class. Did you tell the teacher? Matthew asked, his voice calm. I did. The teacher talked to him, but he wouldn't admit it. He said I fell off the horse by accident, Marco replied, sniffling. Matthew remained silent for a moment, his gaze focused on his younger cousin. William also threatened me, Marco continued, his voice shaky. He said he'd beat me up if I told anyone. Matthew gently rubbed Marco's head. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'll bring you with me, and we'll teach him a lesson. Thanks, brother. Marco said, a smile returning to his face. The two cousins approached William, who stood there smirking, unaware of what was coming. William, Matthew began, his tone serious. My brother told me you pushed him off the horse during class and then threatened him afterward. I think it's time we had a word about your behavior. William sneered, his face tight with anger. So what? I just don't like the look of him, and I want to teach him a lesson. He's always laughing. It's annoying. Matthew's gaze hardened as he pointed at William. I feel sorry for your parents, and I feel sorry for Rickman School, he snapped. What? William's expression faltered slightly, now on the defensive. Your parents sent you here to become an impressive person. Not only have you failed to focus on your studies, but you're also involved in bullying. Have you forgotten the values this school tries to teach you? Matthew's tone was stern. William stood still, looking uncomfortable. Your teachers, who've invested so much time in you, would be disappointed. You might think your actions won't matter if no one finds out, but you're not thinking about the long-term consequences. This could affect your future more than you realize, Matthew continued, his words cutting through the air. William's face flushed with tension as Matthew's words sank in. Shut up, William muttered, his voice quivering. Matthew remained unflinching. If shutting me up makes you face your mistakes and become a better person, I'd gladly do it. But you just want me to be quiet because you're too afraid to confront what you've done. I won't let you avoid it, Matthew replied. He took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. I don't want the reputation of our beloved school tarnished by someone like you. I hope you'll realize your mistakes, turn things around, and become a student this school can be proud of. Don't let your parents down, Matthew said firmly. Tears welled up in William's eyes, his shoulders shaking as he sank to the ground. Stop, please stop, he cried. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Matthew waited, watching William with a steady gaze. You won't bully anyone again, right? I won't, never again, William sobbed, his voice barely audible. Matthew nodded in satisfaction, his expression softening slightly. I hope so. And on behalf of the school, thank you for realizing your mistake, he said, turning to leave with a sense of accomplishment. Wow. You're so cool. I want to be as cool as you. Marco said cheerfully as he walked alongside Matthew. It's nothing. Remember, fighting is for the lowest class of people. We need to convince others with logic and focus on studying, Matthew replied calmly. Yes, brother. Marco said, smiling. The next day, Marco returned, this time with one eye swollen and red. Brother, he called out, his voice tinged with tears. Charlie pushed me off the horse during equestrian class. I tried to reason with him like you said, but he beat me up halfway. Matthew's face softened with concern. How did this happen? Did you tell the teachers? Mr. Who saw him beating me and lectured him, Marco explained, his voice still shaky. Matthew gently patted his head. Don't cry, he said, keeping his tone calm. Why does Marco always get bullied during equestrian class? He wondered. During the next equestrian class, Matthew decided to observe. He hid behind a tree as the class began. Class, your horses are here, the teacher announced, leading the horses before them. Prosperity. I missed you so much. Marco exclaimed, running toward his horse. Hi, Jenny, he waved to the next horse. Her name is Princess, a girl snapped, irritated. Hi, red hair. Hi, extreme jet. Feathers, youth, overcharge. Marco greeted, calling the horses by odd names, which only annoyed the other riders. Matthew furrowed his brow, tense as he watched Marco's behavior. Soon, the class began riding. Yay! Prosperity is the fastest, faster than all of you. Marco boasted loudly, drawing angry glares from the other students. I really want to stop him, Matthew thought, his frustration growing. Later that night, Matthew was deep into his studies, reading books on how to help Marco. Indulging your little brother too much can make him never grow up. To protect him, you have to be a strict older brother. Teach him the harsh realities of the world so he won't be taken advantage of when he gets older, he read aloud to himself. His eyes lit up with understanding. I see. I need to help Marco learn to be independent. He scribbled down a plan to guide Marco toward maturity. Suddenly, his phone rang. Why is Uncle calling me at this time? He wondered as he looked at the caller ID. He answered the call. Matthew, your parents were involved in an accident, his uncle's voice came through, filled with sadness. What? Matthew's voice was frozen with disbelief. Stay in your room for now. The caretaker will be there soon to take you to attend your parents' funeral, his uncle continued, his voice somber. Matthew stood frozen, his pen slipping from his hand. His world seemed to halt in that moment. At the airport, Grandpa and Grandma Jen waited for Matthew as he stepped off the plane, their faces reflecting sadness. Grandma Jen rushed to him, pulling him into a hug. Your parents asked us to take care of you. We'll be your parents from now on, she said, her voice heavy with emotion as Matthew's eyes welled up with tears. At home, Matthew couldn't hold back his sorrow. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he watched his parents' will on TV. We know that it's dangerous for you to go to Mexico frequently for charity work, which is why we've made a will. If anything happens to us, Matthew Jen will be taken in by Jen Janjuan and his wife. When Matthew comes of age, all our assets will be inherited by him, his parents' voices echoed from the screen. The funeral passed, and a week later, Matthew returned to school. In his room, he sat still, a somber expression on his face. Suddenly, the sound of sobbing reached his door. Marco entered, tearful. Where did you go, brother? George pushed me off the horse during equestrian class. Help me teach him a lesson, Marco pleaded, his voice shaky. Matthew's gaze was hard as he looked at Marco. Do you know why you're always getting bullied during equestrian class? It's because you're too noisy. Didn't you notice that your classmates don't like you? You're always laughing like an idiot. When will you grow up? Do you think I'll take care of you for the rest of your life like your parents did? He scolded, his words cutting through the air. Marco stood frozen, tears starting to well up as Matthew's words sank in. Without another word, he turned and left the room sobbing. Matthew sat down, a sense of sadness creeping over him as he looked at the incomplete plan he had written to help Marco mature. He sighed, uncertain of how to proceed. 3 years later, at the school's equestrian competition, Marco sat calmly on his horse, ready for the race. Marco, even though prosperity is fast, the champion this time will be my princess, said Yuki, sitting next to him. What an arrogant girl, Marco muttered under his breath. Be careful. You might not be able to find a husband with that attitude. I'll confess to Matthew after I defeat you, Yuki replied, a smile on her flushed face. The referee signaled the start of the race, and a gunshot rang out. The riders spurred their horses forward, racing hard for the finish line. Marco, his face serious, pushed his horse, Prosperity, to catch up with Yuki, who was leading the pack. Just as they were nearing the final stretch, Marco's horse collided with Yuki's. Move! Marco shouted, his horse rubbing against Yuki's, causing her to lose her balance. Yuki! Matthew called from the stands, his eyes widening as he saw Yuki begin to fall off her horse. Without hesitation, Matthew dashed onto the field, catching her just before she hit the ground. Yuki, are you okay? He asked, his voice filled with concern as they lay on the grass. I'm fine. Thank you for catching me, Yuki replied, her face flushed. That was so impressive. I want to marry you, she added, a soft smile on her face. Matthew was taken aback, unsure how to respond. Marco, what were you thinking? Matthew shouted as Marco and a few teachers rushed over to them. Are you hurt? Marco asked Yuki, his tone calmer now. Matthew's anger flared. What kind of attitude is that? Yuki almost got hurt. Just for victory, you're willing to risk everything. Marco remained unfazed. Yuki, only immature people are overly cautious. Mature people do whatever it takes to get what they want, he replied coldly. Matthew's frustration grew. You found a way to justify your reckless behavior, he said sharply. Marco shot back, you're not much different. You show kindness to outsiders, but when it comes to your family, you're just cold. Enough, your brothers, Yuki interjected, raising her voice to stop the argument. Later, in the boardroom, Marco's thoughts were interrupted by Secretary Lee. Sir, your wife and son are outside, Lee whispered. Let them in, Marco instructed. Sophia entered with little Romeo in her arms. Good morning, directors, she greeted, smiling as she stepped into the room. Did you win? Let me tell you, Roro deserves a lot of credit, she whispered to Marco. Marco smiled and gestured for her to sit on his lap, pulling Romeo close. The directors looked uncomfortable. Sir, this is a directors' meeting, not a family gathering, Director Wang said sternly. If it's inappropriate for me to carry my wife and son, then is it appropriate for Director Wang to be holding another woman who isn't his wife? Marco asked, his tone casual, but his words clearly striking a nerve with Wang, who grew visibly tense. I suddenly remembered something, Marco continued. Please send my greetings to your wife. Tell her I'll visit her personally when I'm free. Director Wang's face turned pale. What do you need with her? It's nothing serious, Marco replied, a small smile on his face. I just wanted to ask her if she's been having any financial trouble lately. After all, transferring such a large amount of money to an overseas account so suddenly could leave someone a little short, right? Wang's expression turned frantic. Master Jian, you must be joking. What do you mean? It's a small matter, Marco said, dismissing the concern. But since we're in a meeting, I'll keep it brief. Isn't the meeting over? I've defeated my brother and will continue to be the president of Jianyi Group. Is there anything else the directors wish to discuss? Marco asked, his gaze sweeping the room. Matthew, who had remained silent, stood up. You're just lucky to have won this time. Don't get too pleased with yourself, he said, his voice cutting through the room. Don't worry, I'll prove to you that I'll always come out on top, Marco said as Matthew walked past him. Then let's wait and see, Matthew replied before leaving the boardroom. Later, at Matthew's villa, He sat in a chair, his disappointment evident. Just then, Yuki appeared from behind, startling him. You look so sullen all the time. It'd be strange if people around you weren't intimidated, she said as she sat next to him. Why are you still here? Matthew snapped. It's none of your business where I am, she responded with a shrug. Leave, he demanded, but she chuckled lightly. Matthew Jen, what you use on others won't work on me. We went to the same school when we were younger. I know you too well, she said, clearly unfazed. Matthew narrowed his eyes. Do you really think I won't do something about it? He threatened. Uh-oh? Are we doing this here, or should I take a shower first? She teased, blowing a playful kiss. Before she could say anything else, Matthew grabbed her face, his expression hardening. You'd better stop looking at me like that, he warned her. Yuki smirked. Otherwise, what? You might actually get excited, she teased with a smile. Matthew forced her to lie on the sofa, ripping her dress. Since you don't want to leave, you'll have to deal with this, he said, his voice firm as he had his way with her. When done, Yuki was full of bruises as she lay tiredly on the sofa. Marco got up, dressing properly before walking to his backyard. In the backyard, Marco walked towards Lee, who was waiting for him. I told you not to approach me unless it was necessary, Marco said, clearly displeased. I'm sorry, but it wasn't convenient over the phone, Lee replied, bowing slightly. Yuki Bai is now staying at my place. You need to be careful not to be seen by her. I see, Matthew responded coldly. Sorry, the plan was interrupted. That woman and her son arrived today unexpectedly, Lee continued, looking tense. Marco trusts you because you're reliable, Matthew said, his tone steady. But you let a child's tactics affect the election. I didn't think it would impact things. I thought it was just a joke, Lee admitted, visibly uneasy. Go back for now. I'll contact you later, Matthew said, his expression unwavering. Understood, Lee replied, bowing again before leaving. As Matthew walked back into the house, his mind raced. Marco, you could have stepped down and avoided all this. But you're making it harder for both of us. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.